Up to this point, British cinema has been defined by a lack of coordination. Films are made, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. Studios operate, but without a stable system connecting production, distribution, and exhibition, even at moments of popularity, as with Gainsborough Pictures, success exists within a fragmented environment. The problem is clear. There is activity, but there is no system. Then, suddenly, the conditions change, not gradually, not through internal development, but through external pressure. The outbreak of World War II does not simply affect British cinema, it reorganises the environment in which it operates. Because in wartime, film is no longer just entertainment. It becomes a tool for communication, a tool for morale, a tool for shaping perception both domestically and internationally. And once film takes on that function, the question of how it is organised changes. The lack of coordination that had defined British cinema up to this point is no longer sustainable, because a tool cannot function effectively if it is fragmented. And so, for the first time, coordination is not just desirable, it is necessary. This necessity is embodied in institutions such as the Ministry of Information, which begins to oversee and guide the production and dissemination of film. Alongside it, units such as the Crown Film Unit, a government-backed production group bringing filmmakers and resources together, help turn policy into actual films. This does not mean that cinema becomes entirely controlled in a rigid mechanical sense, but it does mean that the relationship between film and the structures around it changes. Production is no longer purely a matter of individual companies operating independently. Distribution is no longer entirely shaped by market forces. Exhibition becomes part of a broader effort to reach and influence audiences. In other words, the elements that had previously been disconnected began to align. To see what this looks like in practice, you just have to look at the films themselves. One of the most striking examples is London Can Take It. Produced to demonstrate British resilience during the Blitz, it presents images of London under bombardment alongside calm, measured narration. The effect is deliberate. It is not simply to show destruction, but to frame it, to present endurance as normal, to shape how both domestic and international audiences understand what they are seeing. This is not just filmmaking, it is coordinated communication. Another example is Listen to Britain, associated with filmmakers such as Humphrey Jennings. Here the approach is different. There is no direct narration guiding interpretation. Instead, the film assembles images and sounds of everyday life during wartime Britain: factories, dances, military activity, ordinary moments. The structure is carefully constructed, but it appears natural. What it produces is not instruction, but atmosphere, a sense of shared experience. Again, this is not accidental. It is part of a broader effort to define how the nation sees itself. What these films demonstrate is that wartime cinema is not simply about content, it is about organisation. Films are made with a clear understanding of their role. They are not isolated productions, they are components of a larger system of communication. This system extends beyond individual films. It shapes how films are circulated. Newsreels, short films, and features are arranged in a way that ensure consistent exposure. Audiences encounter them as part of a structured program. For many, this becomes routine. Even during the Blitz, people continue to attend cinemas, sitting together through screenings that combine information, reassurance, and entertainment. The experience is collective. The cinema is not just showing films, it is reinforcing a shared understanding of events. The relationship between production and exhibition becomes more direct, more intentional, more controlled. This does not eliminate variation. Different filmmakers bring different approaches. Different films serve different purposes, but they operate within a shared framework. and that framework is new. Before the war, British cinema struggled to connect its parts. Production, distribution, and exhibition existed, but not as a unified system. During the war, that unity is, at least, partially achieved. Not through market evolution, but through necessity. This is the key shift. British cinema, which had previously operated as a collection of disconnected efforts, is now functioning, however imperfectly, as a coordinated whole. And that produces a different kind of output. Films are made with a clearer sense of purpose. They are designed not just to attract audiences, but to address them, to inform, to reassure, to unify. This does not eliminate entertainment. Feature films continue to be made. Audiences still attend cinemas for diversion as well as information. But even entertainment exists within the same environment. It contributes to a broader sense of national experience. Cinema becomes part of daily life in a new way, a regular shared activity in a period of uncertainty. Wartime audiences go to the cinema not just to watch films, but to participate in something collective, a shared narrative, a shared mood, a shared understanding of events. This gives cinema a different kind of weight. It is no longer simply a product, it is a part of a national process, and that process requires organisation. This does not mean that the system is perfect, far from it. There are limitations, constraints on resources, competing priorities, tensions between creative and informational goals. But the important point is not that the system is flawless, it is that it exists. For the first time, British cinema operates within a structure that connects its parts. Production feeds into distribution, distribution feeds into exhibition. Exhibition feeds back into the broader purpose that shapes production. This is what had been missing, and now it has been demonstrated. Because once coordination has been shown to be possible, the terms of the problem change. Before the war, fragmentation could be seen as a condition. After the war, fragmentation becomes a failure, because an alternative has been experienced. The idea of organisation has been introduced. The possibility of control has been made visible. This is what makes the wartime period so significant in this history. It does not create a permanent system, but it proves that one can exist. And that proof shifts the question. Before the war, the question is, why is British cinema so fragmented? After the war, the question becomes, if coordination is possible, why is it not sustained? That shift is crucial because it reframes the absence of a system as something that can be addressed, something that can be solved. And once a problem is defined in those terms, it invites a response. That response does not emerge immediately, but it is already taking shape because the experience of wartime coordination leaves behind more than just films. It leaves behind knowledge, practical understanding of how production, distribution, and exhibition can be aligned. It leaves behind relationships, networks of people who have worked together within a coordinated framework. It leaves behind expectations, a sense that cinema can operate as part of something larger than itself. These are not abstract changes. They affect how the industry thinks, how it plans, how it imagines its own possibilities, and they create the conditions under which a more formal attempt at organisation can be made. This is where the transition begins, from coordination imposed by necessity to coordination attempted by design. Because once the war ends, the structures that enforced alignment begin to loosen. The urgency fades, direct control diminishes, but the idea remains, the idea that British cinema does not have to operate as a collection of disconnected efforts, that it can function as a system. And it is this idea that defines what comes next, because the next phase is not simply a continuation of wartime conditions. It is an attempt to take what was learned under pressure and make it permanent. an attempt to build a structure that can sustain itself without the force of necessity. An attempt, in other words, to create an industry. And that attempt will be led by a figure who approaches cinema not as a series of films, but as a system to be organised. J. Arthur Rank.